The Truth About Success: Why Quantity of Attempts Can Matter as Much as Quality by David Russo. You only see what worked. When you look at someone successful, you usually see what worked. You see the best-selling book, the thriving business, the breakthrough invention, the championship, the promotion, the popular video, or the opportunity that changed everything. What you rarely see are all the attempts surrounding that success, the ideas that went nowhere, the applications that were rejected, the projects nobody noticed, the calls that weren't returned, and the experiments that failed. We are taught to associate success with quality, talent, intelligence, and hard work, and all of those things matter. But there may be another ingredient hiding in plain sight: quantity. What if many successful people aren't successful because everything they do works? What if they succeed because they do enough things that eventually some of them work extraordinarily well? Introduction: The hidden numbers behind success. Success stories are usually told backward. We begin with the achievement and reconstruct the journey that led to it. Once we know how the story ends, the path can appear much straighter than it actually was. A person had an idea, pursued it, overcame some obstacles, and succeeded. But real life rarely unfolds so neatly. There may have been dozens of abandoned ideas, failed experiments, wrong turns, rejected proposals, disappointing results, and moments when nothing seemed to be working. Those experiences often disappear from the final story because the successful result becomes the path worth remembering. This audiobook explores a different way of thinking about achievement. Quality matters enormously, but quality may not be enough by itself. Quantity matters too. The more intelligent attempts you make, the more opportunities you create to learn, improve, meet the right people, discover unexpected possibilities, and eventually produce something exceptional. The goal is not to replace quality with quantity. It is to understand that quantity can sometimes be one of the forces that creates quality. Success may not be about making everything work. It may be about making enough thoughtful attempts that a few of them eventually work extremely well. Chapter 1. We see the success, not the attempts. When someone becomes successful, the successful result can overshadow almost everything that came before it. We remember the company that became enormous rather than the earlier business ideas that disappeared. We remember the famous book rather than the manuscripts that were rejected or forgotten. We remember the invention that changed the world rather than the prototypes that failed. History naturally preserves the winners because winners are interesting, but this can create a distorted picture of how success actually happens. Imagine someone creates 100 projects during a career. 80 attract almost no attention. 15 perform reasonably well. 4 become genuinely successful, and 1 becomes extraordinary. Years later, that will be what people talk about. Probably that extraordinary success. They may even describe the person as someone who seems to have a special ability to succeed. But the complete story would reveal something different. 99 other attempts existed around the one everyone remembers. This is one reason comparing ourselves with successful people can be misleading. We may be comparing our current attempt with somebody else's greatest result. We see their highlight without seeing their entire body of work. Once we understand this, failure begins to look different. An unsuccessful attempt doesn't necessarily mean we are moving away from success. It may simply mean that we are experiencing the invisible part of the process that almost nobody notices once success finally arrives. Chapter 2. The Mathematics of Taking More Shots. Consider a basketball player taking a shot. Even an excellent player doesn't expect every shot to go in. Missing a shot doesn't prove the player is incapable of scoring. It is simply one outcome within a larger number of attempts. Success in life is obviously far more complicated than basketball. But the analogy reveals something important. If opportunities contain uncertainty, increasing the number of good attempts can increase the number of opportunities for something to work. Suppose you make 10 serious attempts at something and one succeeds. That doesn't mean every additional group of 10 attempts will produce exactly one success. Life doesn't operate with such predictable probabilities, but it does illustrate an important principle. Someone who makes one attempt has given reality one opportunity to respond. Someone who makes 50 thoughtful attempts has created many more possibilities. Different people may notice them. Circumstances may change. Their skills may improve. And one attempt may succeed for reasons they never could have predicted beforehand. There is an important qualification. The attempts must have some reasonable chance of producing the desired outcome. Taking 1,000 terrible shots isn't necessarily better than taking 10 excellent ones. Quantity works best when it is combined with learning. Attempt something, observe what happened, make an adjustment, and attempt again. Then quantity becomes more than repetition. It becomes an engine for discovery. Chapter 3. Quality matters, but so does quantity. We often hear the expression quality over quantity, and there are situations where that is excellent advice. Producing more of something worthless doesn't automatically create value. A poorly made product doesn't become good because you manufacture 1,000 of them. A bad strategy doesn't become intelligent because you repeat it every morning. Quality matters, and nothing in this audiobook is meant to suggest otherwise. But the phrase can become misleading when it convinces us that quality and quantity are enemies. They can actually reinforce each other. A musician who plays thousands of hours may become more skilled. A writer who writes hundreds of pages may become more effective. A salesperson who speaks with many people may become better at communicating. A creator who produces repeatedly can begin to understand what connects with an audience. Quantity can become practice, and practice can produce quality. Perhaps the better principle is not quality over quantity, but quality through quantity. Make something as well as you reasonably can. Put it into the world. Study what happens and make the next version better. You don't need to deliberately produce poor work, but you also don't need every attempt to represent the absolute pinnacle of what you will ever be capable of producing. Sometimes you discover excellence by producing enough work to find it. Chapter 4. Your first attempts probably won't be your best. Beginners sometimes judge themselves according to the standards of experts. Someone plays a musical instrument for several months and compares themselves with someone who has practiced for 30 years. Someone uploads their first videos and compares them with a creator who has made thousands. Someone starts a business and wonders why they don't possess the instincts of an entrepreneur who has spent decades solving problems. We see the expert's current performance without experiencing the thousands of repetitions that produced it. Your first attempt may not be very good, neither may your 10th. That can be difficult to accept because we naturally want evidence that we are talented enough to continue. But early attempts have another purpose. They expose weaknesses. They reveal what we don't know. They turn theoretical knowledge into experience. The person who actually attempts something encounters problems that the person merely thinking about it never has to solve. Creates an interesting paradox. People sometimes wait until they are good enough before beginning, but beginning may be precisely how they become good enough. You cannot receive the lessons of attempt number 50 if fear prevents attempt number 1. The early work doesn't need to prove that you are destined for greatness. It simply needs to move you toward the person who can produce better work later. Chapter 5. Failure is data. Failure hurts partially because we interpret it personally. The project failed. Therefore, perhaps I am a failure. The audience didn't respond. Therefore, perhaps I have nothing worth saying. The customer said no. Therefore, perhaps I am bad at selling. The application was rejected. Therefore, perhaps I am not qualified. But there is another way to interpret an unsuccessful attempt. It produced information. Every attempt creates feedback, even when the feedback isn't what we wanted. Perhaps the idea was good, but the timing was wrong. Perhaps the product was useful, but poorly explained. Perhaps the audience was wrong. Perhaps the price was too high. Perhaps the presentation was confusing. Perhaps the strategy almost worked, but one important element was missing. Or perhaps the entire idea was flawed. Discovering that can be valuable too. Failure becomes especially powerful when it changes the next attempt. If attempt number 10 fails in exactly the same way as attempt number 1 and nothing has been learned, quantity isn't helping very much. But if every few attempts produce new understanding, the process begins to evolve. Failure then becomes research conducted in the real world. You paid for the information with effort, disappointment, or time. You might as well use what you purchased. Chapter 6. The success rate nobody talks about. Imagine someone attempts 100 meaningful projects and only 5 become significant successes. At first glance, a 5% success rate sounds terrible. 95 attempts didn't become major winners. If you focused exclusively on the failures, you might conclude that this person was remarkably unsuccessful. But that interpretation changes dramatically depending on what happened with those 5 successes. What if one created a career? What if another generated enough money to support the next 10 projects? What if another introduced a person to someone who changed their life? What if another helped thousands of people? What if the 5th became the achievement for which that person was remembered? Suddenly, the 95 unsuccessful attempts don't seem nearly as important. Their existence didn't prevent the 5 successes from mattering. This reveals a strange feature of success. You may not need a high success rate. You may need a few outcomes with unusually large consequences. Of course, this differs by field, and some areas cannot tolerate repeated careless failure. But in many creative, entrepreneurial, professional, and personal pursuits, the goal isn't to make every attempt successful. The goal may be to make enough intelligent attempts to discover the few that matter most. Hello, this is David Russo. I have found that the more attempts I take, the more chances I have. And I've found that to be true with almost anything, with any goal I'm trying to achieve. Not every attempt is going to work, but every attempt gives me another chance. And sometimes all it takes is one of those chances to work. Chapter 7. Why perfectionism reduces your chances. Perfectionism can sound like a virtue. Someone says, I won't release this until it's perfect, and it appears to demonstrate high standards. Sometimes those standards are appropriate. Important work deserves care, but perfectionism can also become fear wearing respectable clothing. If nothing is ever good enough to release, then nothing enters the world where it can be tested. The perfectionist often tries to solve every problem before encountering the problem. They imagine every possible criticism, every potential mistake, and every reason something could fail. Meanwhile, another person creates a thoughtful version, releases it, receives actual feedback, and begins improving. 6 months later, the perfectionist may still be polishing attempt number 1, while the other person has reached attempt number 25. The solution isn't to become careless. It is to recognize the difference between excellence and paralysis. Excellence says, make this good. Perfectionism sometimes says, make this impossible to criticize. Those are very different standards. Nothing meaningful is immune from criticism. At some point, creation has to leave your hands and encounter reality. Reality can teach you things perfectionism never will. Chapter 8. Volume creates opportunity. An attempt can succeed in ways you never intended. You make a phone call about one opportunity and learn about another. You attend an event expecting nothing significant and meet someone important. You create something that doesn't become popular, but one person sees it and contacts you. You apply for one position and are considered for a different one. Life contains connections that are almost impossible to predict beforehand. This means that quantity can create secondary opportunities. The immediate result isn't the only result. An unsuccessful project may introduce you to a collaborator. A conversation that doesn't produce a sale may produce a referral. A video that doesn't receive many views may teach you an idea that becomes the foundation of another video. Attempts can create branches, and those branches can lead somewhere completely unexpected. People sometimes wait for the perfect opportunity as though it will arrive clearly labeled. But opportunities often emerge while we are already moving. Action places us in contact with people, information, problems, and possibilities that remain invisible while we stand still. Volume increases those points of contact. You cannot control what will emerge from them, but you can create more places where something potentially valuable can happen. Chapter 9. The attempts compound. Attempt number 1 and attempt number 100 are not necessarily equal. By the 100th attempt, you may understand the field better. You may communicate more clearly. You may recognize mistakes sooner. You may know more people. You may have developed a reputation. You may possess better tools. You may also have learned which opportunities aren't worth pursuing. This is why repeated intelligent effort can compound. Each attempt can leave something behind even when it doesn't produce the desired result. Knowledge remains, experience remains, relationships may remain, skills remain, confidence can remain. Even mistakes can remain as warnings about roads you don't need to travel again. The visible outcome may disappear while the invisible benefits accumulate. Eventually, what appears to outsiders as a sudden breakthrough may actually be the combined result of everything that came before it. They see the moment the door opened. You remember every door you knocked on before that. The breakthrough wasn't necessarily separate from the failed attempts. In some cases, it was built out of them. Chapter 10. Know when to persist and when to adjust. There is a danger in celebrating persistence without qualification. Sometimes quitting an approach is exactly the right decision. If something repeatedly fails and the evidence clearly indicates that the strategy is flawed, stubbornly repeating it isn't admirable. Persistence becomes powerful when it is connected to awareness. Think of the difference between persistence in the goal and persistence in the method. You might remain committed to becoming financially independent while changing the business you're pursuing. You might remain committed to reaching an audience while changing how you communicate. You might remain committed to becoming healthier while replacing an approach that doesn't work. The destination can remain while the route changes. Intelligent quantity, therefore, includes adjustment. Take the shot, observe where it lands, and modify the next shot. Ask what is improving and what isn't. Notice patterns. Listen to feedback without becoming controlled by every opinion. Persistence doesn't mean refusing to change. Sometimes persistence means being willing to change repeatedly so that you can continue moving toward what matters. Chapter 11. One success can pay for many failures. Some areas of life contain what could be called asymmetric outcomes. The downside of an unsuccessful attempt may be relatively limited, while the upside of a successful attempt can be enormous. A creator may spend several hours making a video that receives little attention, but another video requiring similar effort could eventually reach hundreds of thousands of people. The cost of the attempts may be similar, while the outcomes are radically different. Businesses frequently operate around this reality. Not every product becomes a bestseller. Not every marketing campaign works. Not every investment produces an extraordinary return. Not every idea deserves expansion. But a small number of major winners can sometimes generate enough value to compensate for many unsuccessful experiments. The same principle can appear in careers, creative work, networking, and other areas of life. This doesn't mean taking reckless risks. The potential cost of failure always matters. You shouldn't make 100 attempts that could each destroy your finances, reputation, safety, or well-being. But when the downside of an attempt is manageable and the potential upside is meaningful, repeated experimentation can make sense. Sometimes you don't need everything to work. You need one thing to work well enough that the other attempts become footnotes. Chapter 12. Take more intelligent shots. At some point, every philosophy of success has to encounter action. You can study productivity, motivation, psychology, business, creativity, and personal development for years, but eventually something has to be attempted. The application has to be submitted. The call has to be made. The business has to open. The work has to be published. The question has to be asked. The first step has to occur. Taking more shots doesn't mean frantically doing everything. It means deliberately increasing the number of meaningful opportunities you create. Instead of asking one person, perhaps you ask 10. Instead of testing one idea, perhaps you test several. Instead of allowing one rejection to determine your future, perhaps you recognize that rejection as one data point inside a much larger experiment. You cannot know which attempt will matter most. The uncertainty can be frustrating, but it can also be liberating. Attempt number 7 may fail. Attempt number 23 may surprise you. Attempt number 68 may introduce you to the person who changes everything. Attempt number 100 may work because everything you learned from the previous 99. Your responsibility isn't to guarantee the outcome of every attempt. Your responsibility is to keep creating intelligent opportunities for success to occur. Conclusion: success may be hiding inside the attempts. The truth about success may be much less glamorous than the finished stories make it appear. Behind an impressive achievement, there may be years of ordinary work, unsuccessful attempts, rejection, uncertainty, experiments, mistakes, and projects nobody remembers. We see the trophy, but not every practice session. We see the successful company, but not every discarded idea. We see the popular creation, but not everything the creator produced before anyone was paying attention. Success can look exceptional from the outside while being built through repetition on the inside. Quality matters. It always will. But quantity deserves a place in the conversation. Quantity gives you practice. Quantity gives you feedback. Quantity creates opportunities. Quantity allows you to discover what you're capable of producing instead of demanding that you know beforehand. The real power appears when quality and quantity work together. Make something good, release it, learn from it, improve it, and try again. Over enough intelligent repetitions, you may become capable of producing something you could never have created when you began. And perhaps this is the most encouraging truth of all. You don't need everything you attempt to succeed. You may attempt 100 things and discover that only a few truly work. But those few may be enough. One could change your career. One could change your finances. One could reach the right person. One could open a door you didn't know existed. One could change your life. Instead of asking, what if my next attempt fails? Perhaps there is another question worth asking. How many attempts am I willing to make to discover the one that succeeds?